Now, Kate, do you ever get sick of cooking?
Never get sick of cooking. I was really concerned before I went on MasterChef that it might kill my love of cooking.
Yeah,
all that pressure,
I wondered about that.
All that craziness.
Having some more?
No, I'm all right, thanks. I'll end up dropping it on myself.
I know. I'm just thinking about that. I'm eager to get into it, but I know what's going to happen.
What was I saying?
Actually, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm not trying to put my back there. I just need to use the cutlery to cut it. Oh yeah, keep talking, sorry.
I can't remember what I was saying.
Oh, about the food, like whether you lost the love for it.
I thought I'd really, being in all that pressure-packed situation, that it would kill my love of cooking. In fact, it's actually deepened it. I'm even more passionate about it now than I was before. I think it's one of those skills where you just keep learning, and the more you learn, the more you realise you need to learn. And I absolutely love it. Can't get enough of it.
You can keep talking for about half an hour. I'm just going to...
Yeah.
If my mum was here, she'd say, I'd have to chop that up into, 30 pieces before I'd start eating. But they look sizable, right?
That's all right.
Now, have I made it into the MasterChef class or not?
You have.
With the thing on the side?
Do you know, my 6-year-old will often throw one over her shoulder, because it's what I do at home. I've always got a tea towel over my shoulder. She goes, "Look, Mum, I'm a MasterChef."
Now, please don't think me rude. Do you mind if I ask questions while I eat as well?
Go for it.
Because I haven't had dinner, and this is extraordinary, is it not, folks?
You enjoying it?
And
how easy to make.
It is awesome. It is awesome. But we'll take a bit of it. Well, I'll enjoy this. How good is that? I've got a full plate up here. You got the little metal ones. Look at this. Goes with the job, I suppose. One of the perks. Tell us a little bit more about what drives you, though. I mean, obviously, food is a passion of yours.
Yeah.
It drives you. Is your passion for food the most important thing for you, or are there other things that drive you?
Look, the way that I view food, for me, is it's actually a tool. Now, it's a wonderful way for me to be creative, and that's where I get a lot of joy from it. But even more important than that, it's a tool that I think brings people together. I don't know about you, but I find that when I sit down to a meal, it's so much better if it's shared with other people. There's conversation, and it becomes less about the food you eat and more about the time that you spend together. So for me, people are far more important than the food itself. And look, if I take that even a step further, I can't even say that people are the most important thing in my life. They're up there, they're pretty high. But for me as a Christian, which is obviously part of the reason I've been invited here tonight, it's actually about the God who made people and who made food and bring the two of them together. And that for me, my relationship with God is far more important than anything else.
How did you come to know God then? I mean, how did that all start?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in a Christian family. So Mum and Dad took us to church on Sundays and sometimes read us the Bible. And I knew a lot of the stories in isolation. I knew about Noah, I knew about David and Goliath and those kinds of things. But when I was in my early 20s, I travelled overseas. I was away from my family. I was away from every routine that I had. And I kind of just stopped living with any reference to God. Just, didn't really need him. It was okay.
Right.
When I came back, I had this real sense that life was rather empty. I remember getting ready to go out one night and thinking, okay, my life just seems to be about going out, having fun, drinking too much, carrying on with life, and it just seemed pointless. I thought, what is the purpose of this? Why am I here? Why am I alive? What is driving me? And I decided then to check out different ways of thinking about the world and life. So I didn't want to just presume that the God that I'd grown up learning about was the only way to think about life. So I actually explored a lot of different other religions. I read about them, I talked to people about them, and the same with other philosophies in life. I just quizzed just about everybody. I'm sure people got sick of me. How do you think about life? Why are we here? What's the purpose? So, and that happened over a couple of years. Just really explored it, asked lots of questions. And I guess the short story is, what I ended up finding was that the God of the Bible was the one that seemed to have all the answers for life.
Yep.
I hadn't, as a child, understood how those stories of the Bible fitted together. But when I looked into it again as an adult, I started to see the bigger picture. And what I found was that there was a God who was just longing to have a relationship with me. And he went to extraordinary lengths to make that happen. So it was the one that sort of answered all those questions about why I'm here, who I am, what my purpose in life is. And, the way I see my Christian faith is very much about, it's that relationship with God. It is not about a list of things to do or things not to do, which sadly I think is what is often portrayed about the Christian life. You have to go to church, you have to be kind, you have to give to charity, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. But when you see the big picture message of the Bible, what we see is a God who made us and made the world because he wants to know us and he wants us to know him. It's all about relationship. But the problem is you can't have a one-way relationship. No. And by nature, we as people, I think, don't want any authority over our life. We don't want anybody to dictate to us how we should live or why we're here. We want to make those decisions ourselves. We want to be our own God, our own king, our own queen, whatever it is. And so I think, in effect, whether we do this consciously or subconsciously, we say to God, actually, I don't really care about you, or I don't want you to be a part of my life. I don't want you to dictate anything to me. So I'm just going to make my own decisions. I'm going to be the one that's in charge. And you can't have a two-way relationship. You can't have a relationship if it's only one way. But I think the fact is that God's not actually happy with that. He doesn't want us to not be in relationship with him. And the natural, I suppose, consequence of having somebody say, I don't really want to be a part of you. I'm either going to ignore you or reject you. We can't have a relationship, so there's separation from God. And as I said, he's not happy about that, so he went to extraordinary lengths to change that situation for us. And that's what I believe he did when he sent Jesus to die on the cross, was Jesus suffered that separation from God so that we as humans don't have to. Now, it doesn't mean that now that I'm a Christian, so I accept that Jesus has done that on my behalf, it doesn't mean that I stop saying to God, I don't really want to do it your way, I want to do it my way. Because that's my understanding what sin is. I think so often we think sin is, murder, cheating, stealing. I see those as the side effects of sin. Sin itself is actually that heartfelt rejection of who God is. And I think once you accept that is the case and that is the state of my heart, and I accept that Jesus has taken that punishment for me so that I don't have to, I'm incredibly liberated to live in relationship with God and not worry about the consequences of the natural state of my heart. So I get to have this relationship with God. And it's not about whether I go to church. When I was in MasterChef, I couldn't go to church. It didn't stop me being a Christian because it's actually about that relationship. Obviously, now that I'm back, I choose to go to church. I want to be. I want to learn more about this God. I want to be with other people who will encourage me in that. But that's not what makes me a Christian.
And fantastic. What a great story too, ladies and gentlemen. And it must be funny going back to church too, because now you are Kate Bracks from MasterChef, whereas before,
they all knew me before. They're like, oh yeah.
Can you please be on the morning tea roster for us every week?
I have been put on there.
we need you to be on the hospitality staff. Hey, what's really interesting, what I found really, really fascinating was how your faith came about on MasterChef. Because I don't know whether you told them beforehand or not, but it was certainly, to us as a viewer, it came about very interesting. It was very much put in the spotlight by some fairly unusual circumstances, wasn't it?
That's right. So I think when most people in the general public realised, it was actually, we did an episode where we were challenged to cook for the Dalai Lama. Now, interestingly, the fact that I was a Christian didn't come out on the show at all. It came out in different media. It came out in a newspaper article. It was interesting. The crew already knew that I was a Christian. I think in my application form, because I was kind of filling it out, not really thinking I was going to send it, I just said whatever came into my head. And because I had this relationship with God and they were asking big questions, what's your greatest fear, what's your biggest ambition, so often it just included something about God. I'm sure they thought when they got my application, oh my goodness, we've got something very good here. And in fact, they do these, what they call backstories. So they come to your house before you start cooking in the kitchen to film little bits of you in your home environment. And then they splice them into to tell your story over the course of the show. And it was interesting that when they first arrived, they said to me, have you got a crucifix around? I was like, no, and you're not putting me in that box. So I think they knew what they were getting, but I think they were surprised because I wasn't that kind of freaky person that jumped on my soapbox all the time to talk about it. My approach has always been, if somebody asks me a question, I will tell them honestly where I'm at. And if conversations end up talking about God, they end up talking about God. Yep. But if they don't, it's okay, I'm not going to force it. I don't see God as a God who forces himself on anybody else. So it's not my job to force him on anybody. So yeah, the Dalai Lama situation came up. We knew that we were going to cook for him. Most challenges, we found out we were cooking and then we started cooking within 10 minutes. This particular one, we stopped and we had a meeting about the proper protocol in dealing with the Dalai Lama. And obviously it became obvious to me at that point that the proper way to refer to him is as Your Holiness. Now, as a Christian, I have a bit of a problem with this because my understanding from the Bible of holiness is it means perfectly right with God. And the challenge is that I'm not holy. You're not holy. Sorry to disappoint you.
No.
But
I knew that when I was born.
But neither is the Dalai Lama. The only person to ever walk the earth that is holy was Jesus because he's perfectly right with God. And so I couldn't, in good conscience as a Christian, call this lovely man Your Holiness. So I asked his representative, can you please tell me if there's something else I can call him that would be just as respectful? And she responded with, yeah, you could call him Dalai Lama, he wouldn't mind at all. Very casual. And so I thought, oh, cool, okay. So when I put down my plate of food, Dalai Lama, this is what I've prepared for you. We did have a reporter on set that day, which was very unusual, but because of the big nature of the Dalai Lama, they allowed a reporter on set and she talked to each of us about our various journeys, and so obviously it came up that I didn't call him Your Holiness, so she quizzed me about that, and then that obviously became the story in the paper the next day. Now, I was unaware of that because we didn't get free-to-air TV, we didn't get newspapers, we didn't get magazines while we were in the house. So I was pretty unaware. My husband did say to me on the phone at one point, oh yeah, there was an article on you in the paper, very low key. But it wasn't until quite a few weeks later, they actually moved Michael and I, when we got to the finale, into a unit for a couple of weeks because they needed to, the house is too big for two people. And in our rooms there were televisions, and I remember our house coordinator saying, I won't tell if you don't tell, because we hadn't watched TV for months. And I remember sitting there on the phone to my husband one night watching Can of Worms, and this question came up, did Kate Bracks do the right thing about calling the Dalai Lama, not calling the Dalai Lama Your Holiness? And I'm sitting there, I'll call you back. I was absolutely gobsmacked that this was out there and I had no idea about it. Yeah. And then my husband did fill me in after that. But yeah, look, I have absolutely no regrets, because the reality for me is that my loyalty lies with God ahead of other people. And I still feel that I was respectful to him, and we had some lovely interchanges that day. I don't think there was any concern from his point of view. And I'm perfectly fine that people will disagree with what I did, but at the end of the day, I'm answerable to God. And so for me, I guess that's something that it just comes about. When you're a Christian, you do make decisions based on a different sort of idea of things, and that was just one of the decisions that I needed to make.
I probably wouldn't have even known it was him. G'day, bloke, how you going? you know, funny enough, and I kid you not, the Dalai Lama arrived in Adelaide today, did he not?
Yeah, I know.
So there's every chance you could be flying out with him tomorrow morning.
Oh, I wonder if they put me on the same plane.
Yeah, g'day, we've met before.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to let that lamb rest a little bit. Yeah. I haven't finished yet. I'm going to. This is just like dinner at home, isn't it, sweetie? I get to enjoy a meal while you tell me your last story. I'm joking. My wife's here tonight to. She's a great cook too. She's tested. You are, sweetie. I love her. She is fantastic. Keep on telling her she needs to go on MasterChef.
She's smarter than that.
Now, back to you and your personal journey. Okay, that really brought the whole thing into the spotlight. For you, though, was the whole experience an intimate thing for you and God? I mean, as you're going through the MasterChef process, I'm picturing, are you praying, Lord, I want to win this thing, help me win this thing. And afterwards as well, has it changed you? Has it brought you closer to God? What about the whole experience for you in that? I mean, has it maybe enlightened you a little bit more to the way God has His purpose, has His hand on our lives, and orchestrates things well beyond our control?
Absolutely.
I mean, who would have thought,
I never dreamed.
Yeah, I know, it's incredible.
I never dreamed that I would win, and it was never something that I ever prayed for to happen. In fact, I was a little bit terrified that it might happen. So, but yes, definitely the process for me was a very good exercise in just relying on God, because it was a pretty big emotional roller coaster. You go through some pretty big highs and some pretty big lows with people. And I was living away from my normal context, away from my husband, away from my children, away from my church, away from my friends. Really, God was that one constant. And I think it probably changed my perspective in terms of even just the way I approach the competition, because I see life as so much bigger than that. And I would often say to myself in my head, it's just food, it's just television, just do it. And I often said to others, come on, life's bigger than MasterChef, and the producers would be like, shush. But I do think it was something that kept me very centred, very grounded. At the end of the day, it didn't matter how long I was there, and at the end of the day, there are far bigger things in life than a reality TV cooking show. So, but the journey through it has been incredible, and I think it really has taught me just to, keep trusting in God. He keeps providing, He keeps doing amazing things. But it's not about the amazing things He does. It's just about that relationship, and that's always just been a constant.
It is an amazing thing, isn't it, to look back in hindsight and see the way God has orchestrated things, and obviously gives you now a sense of peace and assurance that the future.
Yeah, that's right. Don't need to worry about it.
Don't need to worry about it. Exactly right. Yeah.
I think it's important, though, to remember, too, He never promises that life is something going to get cruisy. We live in a world of people who want to rule things their own way, and we have to live with the consequences of that. I mean, you turn on the news and you see some horrific things. God doesn't just automatically take that away. Yet there will be a time where we don't have to live with that anymore. But in this meantime, there are some tough stuff that we have to deal with, and it doesn't automatically make life easy. But what it does give you is that steadiness to know that relationship is unshakable. It doesn't matter what's happening on the outside. That relationship with God is there, and there is an incredible freedom and comfort that comes from that.
Well, aside from being on the morning tea roster at church, does your passion for God and food overlap in any way? I mean, obviously there's an opportunity like this, which is fantastic. You can see more.
Look, the way I see it too is God is a really creative God. He wants us to be, we're made like Him. So many of us are creative. So for me, food is a wonderful outlet for that creativity. And I also think it's a wonderful way of enjoying the good things that God's given us. I think sometimes Christians are viewed a bit as the fun police, not allowed to have too much fun, but it's not the way that God intended it. And I think we've got to be careful not to make our judgments about God based on His people, because we don't kind of have it all together.
No,
we don't get it right all the time. We make big mistakes. We need to find God in the Bible, because that's where we find the true representation of Him. And what we find in there is that a God who wants to give good things to us. And we have gorgeous food. And I feel so fortunate to be able to cook with incredible produce that He's allowed that to happen. He could have just given us one thing to eat to sustain us. That would have been it. But He doesn't. There's so much variety. There's so much that can be done with it, and I think He wants us to enjoy the life that He's given us as well. Yeah,
it is, absolutely. Well, I reckon, I know these guys are staring at me going, come on, bring out dessert. So we might actually it's me. I'm actually going to shut my mouth for a bit. We'll actually finish that off. I reckon now is a perfect opportunity for us to get back behind there and open up the floor, actually. If anyone has any questions they would like to ask Kate, I reckon now is the perfect opportunity. And if we've got another microphone, we can go around on the floor from here. Up here, fantastic. Good on you, Craig. So if you've got questions, feel free to just wave your hand or maybe stand up, and Craig, I might get you to run around there for us and get those questions. In the meantime, what do we need to do for dessert?
Well, we need some ingredients.
Oh, dessert ingredients?
So for dessert, we're doing vincotto pears with mascarpone and caramelised pecans, I think.
There we go. Thank you, guys. Well done. Very beautiful.
Verity.
Do you mind if I continue on here?
Go for it. Eat away. Questions, they can be about MasterChef, they can be about cooking, they can be about life.
Do you mind, folks, if I continue eating? Is that bad? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hi, members of our family have an aversion to coriander for medical reasons.
Yes.
What is the best substitute?
Oh, so can't have coriander seed or anything.
No.
Look, I don't think there is a direct substitute. I think just choose a different spice. So, I mean, you can even leave it out. So just cumin and fennel would still be beautiful. You could put in chili flakes. You can put in, there's so many different spices. You'll get a slightly different flavour profile. Yeah. But hey, it'll still be tasty. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. Just swap it in. In fact, often when I look at recipes, I look at a recipe and I think I know I've got that in my pantry, but if I haven't got that, what else would work? Yeah, that'll do. I supplement things all the time. That's just, for me, that's the joy in cooking, is because you get different ideas. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Oh. Yeah, good question. So the question was, what was the best thing I cooked before going on MasterChef, and what was the best thing I cooked out of the whole experience, the MasterChef experience? You know, before I went on MasterChef, because I'd watched the other two series quite a lot, I was determined to make a croquembouche. Now, I made this while my little girl was asleep. She was 3 at the time, and I remember having newspaper all over the floor. This croquembouche that I'd built, it wasn't very big, it was probably only about that big, in the middle, and I was trying to do the spun toffee all over it. And she walks out, and I'm like, stop, no, don't come here. And I was just so sure she was just going to come and go, yum, that's good, I'll just eat that. Look, it probably wasn't the world's greatest croquembouche, but I did it. It stood up. So that was the one I was most proud of. Sids, that's a really tough question because I've had some incredible experiences. I think on the show, the dish that I'm most proud of, I was asked to cook against pastry chef Darren Purchase, and he brought out a dish that was a caramelised white chocolate mousse with a straight banana. There were 14 different things on this dish, and when they lifted the cloche, I actually giggled, went, well, I'm not going to be able to make that. But I was in a no-lose situation. I knew that the only thing that could possibly happen was I would learn. And so I just loved this opportunity to try making a straight banana, covering it in some gel thing, making these other little rum jellies, caramelising white chocolate. Never done that. In fact, that's a process that when you do it, I looked at it and thought, yeah, see, if I did that at home, I would have chucked that out. I would have thought that's ruined. So I learned so much through that. But I think for me, it was also a turning point in the competition because at the end, I put it up and it didn't look too dissimilar to his. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just did that. If I can do that, I can probably push myself a lot further. And it's something that stayed with me. I realised at that point that I wasn't reaching my capacity. I was actually playing it very safe. And so it was at that point I went, you know what, you can do more, do more, do more, do more. And I still think I do that now. Like often I'll be cooking a few things and I think, I'll have this idea and I think, yeah, why not? Let's just try and do it. And, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. That's one of the joys of cooking. There's no guaranteed end result, but it's that creative process that I love. And that's probably still the dish that I think, my goodness, I really didn't think I had a hope. And then I did it. Yeah, so. Any other questions? Yeah.
We see a lot of the cooking on the show where you seem to be throwing things together without recipes. I'm thinking particularly of baking. So during your times in the house where you're lying in bed with a cookbook, are you kind of swatting up on
Absolutely.
Basic things and then what I can add? Like just in terms of quantities for baking particularly, you have to have had a suite of skills and a recipe in your head?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the very first day of MasterChef, we're on Cockatoo Island. They issue us with the challenge and I said to the producer, so can we go and get recipes now? She said, no. I was like, pardon? No recipe. I was sure that they were allowed to have recipes under the bench, that they kind of just had a little look at and kept going. So it was a little bit horrifying to me that suddenly I had to pull something together without a recipe because I'd always been very reliant on recipes. And I think that was the same for just about everybody there. We all went, what? Oh no. And from that day on, you saw people going, okay, sweet short crust pastry has this much butter, this much sugar, this much... Yeah, and we did. We just tried to memorise pizza dough, basic pastries, pasta, those kind of essential elements that if you get the combinations wrong, it's not going to work. Fortunately, I think for me, because I have baked my entire life, I've loved baking, I also had a familiarity with what the right textures should be. So I could say, okay, well, I know it's half a block of butter that we started with when I made that cake at home, whatever. And And I think, I know to add enough milk until it's that kind of texture. So it is quite interesting because at the end of a challenge, they ask you to sit down and write the recipe for what you did. And that's then what gets published either on the website, well, they test it, but then it gets published on the website or in the magazine or something like that. Quite funny because you sit down and you go, I don't know how much I put in. Half a cup, maybe? And it was quite interesting, actually, when I did the retro coffee cakes, which was the first one I did in the show, that then got published widely. When it came time to do my cookbook, I thought I might put that in there because everybody asks all the time for it. So I was sent the recipe that they'd published widely, and I thought, I probably don't need to test it, but I'm a little bit of a control freak. I thought, everything that goes in this book, I'm testing. So I made it. Terrible. I just looked at it and went, that's not the cake I made. And I'd had a friend a few weeks earlier who'd said to me, I'm going to make your retro coffee cake today. I was like, great. And at that point I thought, I never heard that from her. I saw her that afternoon at school pickup. I said, you know that retro coffee cake? And she went, yeah. I said, did it work? She said, no. I said, neither did mine. I was horrified. But it's an understandable thing because you're writing it off the top of your head when you've thrown it together. So I'm pretty pedantic about my recipes now because of that experience. I think got to be right. Whatever goes out there I have to know it works. And when I did the book, I actually sent recipes off. Each recipe that I tested, I then sent off to 2 friends to both do it without any information. So that then they could come back and say, I didn't know what you meant here, or I didn't know if that was what it was. And so then I could add more detail. And I get a little bit paranoid about that now. Yeah, good question.
Okay, we might make a start.
Let's go to pairs.
These are the ingredients here.